It's Wednesday, the 15th of October, halfway through the month already. Only seems like yesterday that I was saying the end of September, and we're halfway through this month. Christmas, as crazy as it sounds, is going to be vastly approaching. Let me know how we're doing. Let me know how we're doing today. Let me get into the chat about the news. Get into the chat about what you're hearing. Get into the chat about the thumbnail. Let me know what you think about what we're going to talk about today. I think those of you who are Ineos and Sir Jim wanting to buy the club, I think this is the one for you. Get into it. Have a little watch. Tell me what you think about it. Scott says, dressed up JB. Shampers, I'm in my Sir Jim. Shampers, we're going to buy United, Sir Jim. Scott, yeah. Guys, apologies, I've not done an evening show for the last few days. There's been a couple of things happening as well. So my evening shows will probably come back tomorrow. There won't be one tonight, but I will do an evening show tonight. So this show right now is going to probably be a little bit longer. I think this is going to be very, very interesting. It was to me. One of the reasons why I didn't do a show last night is because I was doing this. I was coming up with something I wanted to bring in, or I don't think other people are looking at this. And obviously we're talking about the sale, and I kind of wanted to have a last piece of this sale stuff before we start talking about the football before the Liverpool game. If you are new here, we're a United fan channel. We are so much more than that. We do some amazing shows on here. We get so many different football fans from all over the country on here as well. Absolutely amazing fans as well. Really, really respectful. And that's the one thing I will always demand on here from people, is that as much as you can have your view, and I will try to read out all of the chats, I'm not a dictator, right? I really do want your opinions on here. I'll try to read as many out as I can. Today I'm gonna do a slightly different format today. I'm gonna read through the stuff. I'll read through a big chunk of this stuff that I've put together, and then we can then go through some of the chats. So get into the chat. Let me know about the upcoming game. Let me know what you think is going to happen. As I say, be respectful. Otherwise, you will be removed. I don't like to do it. I absolutely despise it. But yeah, I'm guessing that's Dutch. I can't understand Dutch. So today we are going to be disgusting. Well, that is a term for it. We're going to be discussing why all of you, or some of you who are Sir Jim, will purchase the club. I'm here today to tell you that Sir Jim could potentially purchase the club, what that means for the debt, and also why I don't think that Sir Jim can purchase the club. I'll give you my opinions based on the facts as I have them, based on my opinion, and you can tell me why you think I'm wrong, or whether you agree, and getting anything in between. So I'm going to start off going by the facts of this, and then we're going to go by the structure of the deal and what it could actually mean. So this is, for me, so probably going to be one of the last shows I'm going to do on this sell talk, because I've got my opinions on it, and everyone sort of has it. I'll say yesterday there was a lot of stuff flying around. I was thinking about doing a show yesterday on the sell, but as we've already discussed on here, there are 4 options. Jim not rich enough to buy the club if he wants to keep it running, and that's it, Scott. And Scott, do you know what, Scott? I don't need to do the show, Scott. You've just summed it up. No, pretty much, Scott. It's really interesting when you look at the figures, and I've got the figures here. Some people are not going to like it, but the figures are the figures. So when we're talking about scenarios, scenario A is nothing's going to happen. It's a load of nonsense. Scenario basically 2 is this a way for the Glazers to think about selling in 2027, because Sir Jim's £33 per share to make his cash back goes forward until that date. But also as well, what it actually does mean as well is that that they could basically make a lot less money. Is this a way to finance the stadium, which I am in that camp? Is this a way to perform, or to get a strategic alliance with a state or a country that could give them bottomless pits of money? Or is this an actual way for them to sell the club? So I'm going to go through the stats, I'll give you the facts, and then we can go through some of the stuff. So Ratcliffe where are we on him? So his net worth over the last couple of years has fluctuated between 17 billion and 30. So I think roughly he's lost about 6 to 7 billion pounds in the last year. So which only puts his wealth around that 17 billion pounds mark. So ultimately, yeah. So worth around that. Now, again, get your opinions in terms of monetary value. Sir Jim, 17 billion pounds. Second of all, this is an interesting one. So Ineos at the moment are worth 66.3 billion pounds. Okay, so you're thinking absolutely fantastic. Now, Ineos are also 12 billion pounds in debt. So what that basically means is that their leverage ability to buy stuff roughly sits around 6 or 7 times what the value is. Now, the reason why that is important is on the basis that billionaires and companies don't tend to pay cash for stuff. Okay, they tend to go and buy, they tend to leverage their assets to go and buy stuff, but then they pay a penalty in terms of a money back to the bank, right? So this is what you do. Okay. Now, the interesting point here is that even though Ineos are asset rich, now one of the things to understand is that you can be very, very asset rich but cash poor. Now, what that means is that you've got lots of assets. Exactly. And I'm going to come through all this, and then I will come to the comments themselves. So Ineos are currently worth 68.33 billion pounds as a company in terms of assets. They have 12 billion pound in debt. Now that is a huge amount of debt. However, when they want to leverage and buy something, they can leverage that value against a thing that they want to buy, and then they pay interest on that debt. Now, who does that sound like? Okay. Now, in terms of cash, and this is the interesting point, 1.8 billion pounds in cash. So when you're thinking about, and don't get me wrong, in terms of cash to us, that is a lot of money. That's Ineos, who make, I think something like, I've got the figures here, they make a lot of money per year. They were 66.3 billion. They've only got 1.8 billion pounds in cash. Now, when we're talking, and this is what we're talking about here, and when we're talking about buying things, 1.8 billion pounds in cash, and this is the cash that they have there to buy stuff with. So a lot of their money is tied up in an asset. Okay, now to service their debt per quarter, that 12 billion pounds lost to service that debt is 235 million pounds per quarter. That's not per year, that's per quarter. So every single quarter they have to pay 235 million pounds. Now there is something called a ranking, which is a Fitch. And don't worry, chat. I will get through the chat. I just want to get through this bit to set the scene, and then I will come into the chats. Now they're ranking. Now, if you're a successful business, you want to be around that A. I think AAA rating. Their ranking at the moment is at negative BB. So basically, what that means is Ineos currently have a negative and a flag against them at the moment, whereby their cash reserve is so low compared to where they want it to be that they actually have cancelled many financial things. So the dividends that they normally pay themselves, that has been cancelled as well. So there's basically a sort of outreach, or there's a mark against them right now because their cash reserve is so low compared to the size of the company. There's 12 billion pound of debt, and their cash at the moment, their access to cash is 1.8. So what that would basically mean is that they would have to sell. If you're talking about leveraging, and you're talking about like the accessibility for them to buy the Glazers out in cash in terms of the Ineos piece, they're £12 billion in debt. So they absolutely, right now, from an asset perspective, they could sell an asset which would devalue the company, but also they could then buy the club. So the number one question here is that if we're looking at Ineos as a company right now, they're not in a great state. So second of all, when we're now talking about the club, we now have to talk about the situation of the club. So Ineos at the moment, I think, own 28.9%, about 30-ish%. And we'll get on to the valuation and that kind of stuff as well. So United themselves, such as Ineos, so Ineos, the company, have £12 billion worth of debt. Their ranking as a company is BB, which is not good. You want to be AAA. 1.8 billion in cash reserves. So they are in debt themselves. And anything that they do at this moment is leverage debt. Now, who does that sound like? So United have high debt. Their total debt was £637 million. 471 of that is long-term debt, but ultimately their debt, including the transfers at the moment, is £1.2 billion. Even though we recorded a revenue of 6.665, we had a loss of £33 million. So once again, when we're looking at companies and the ability to buy, when we're looking at, there are two options here. Number one, do you buy in cash? Okay, which would be the preferred outcome for us fans, or do you leverage debt? Now, there is a theme here. When you're listening to this, I want you to keep the theme of, when we're talking about buying the clubs, and we're separating out Qatar, for example, who are cash rich, against somebody who, in terms of assets, Sir Jim, asset-wise, £17 billion. But we've got to understand, billionaires do not buy things in cash. So imagine £17 billion. Is Sir Jim going to take £5 billion, £6 billion of his own cash and buy the club in cash and clear all of the debt? Or is it more likely with what billionaires do? They leverage the debt against something. Now, they can't leverage at the moment that against Ineos because there's a freeze. So we're going to keep looking at this as well. So on paper, okay, could Sir Jim buy the club up front? Yes, he could. In fact, I'm going to stop there and I'm going to go through the chat. So give me your opinions on the chat, and then I'll go through the rest of the facts, and then we're going to go through the numbers, and you can tell me whether or not you think Sir Jim, and I think this will be staggering if you think that Sir Jim can buy the club. So let's go back through the chat, guys. So Scott says, Jim not rich. Yes, I agree. They can also pull the rug underneath them as well. Uncle, hey, cool uncle. Hello, Rohit. Who will win between United and Liverpool? Look, if Liverpool of last season turn up, there's nothing that we can do other than luck to beat them. Okay? If they don't turn up and we play up, look, if Liverpool play the best of the best of the best and we play the best of the best of the best, Liverpool will win. Okay? It depends what Liverpool turn up. If they're still the inconsistent Liverpool, we've got a chance. But let's look at what we all thought before the City game. City were there to be taken. We lost. So I look, as much as I hate this, I do predict that Liverpool will win. But I ultimately do hope that we can get something from it. Look, I'd be happy with a draw. And it's pathetic of me to say, and I hate to say it, but these players let us down time and time again. So I would go Liverpool 2-0, 1-1, that as well. I'm at it. They are using you to finance their debt. Shameful, exactly. Rohat, hello, my friend. I'm Chelsea. You got caught off light. We're close to 3 billion. They want to build 2.4 stadium. Hence, we bought AG. You are now a selling club. Well, we're not a selling club, but that's fine. It's also in stocks and other things. How much does Ineos own? Roblox. Most of the billionaires are not cash rich. Only cash rich people are Qatar and Saudi. Exactly. If Sir Jim that would be no different from the Glazers, but horrible owners, in my opinion. Exactly. And we are going to go into basically, we're going to go into the debt stuff, and we're going to go into the figures, and I'm going to give you some figures. So let's just go back through the stuff, and then I think if you are thinking Sir Jim will buy the club, and if Sir Jim will buy the club, it's going to astound you. Okay. So could Sir Jim on paper buy the club? So to buy the club, yes. Okay. So could he buy it? Does he have the cash to buy it? No. Could he leverage his own assets? Yes. But let's just talk about could he fundamentally buy the club? Yes, he could. Okay. Now, when I say buy the club, we're just talking about a hypothetical. It's a bit like if you want to go out and you want to buy something you can't afford, but you've got stuff around your house. So you could go sell the TV, you could go sell the car, you can go sell stuff, right? You don't want to, but that is what Sir Jim would have to do. He'd have to go and sell stuff. So could he realistically go and buy the club? Yes, but buying and sustaining a club are two different things. So Sir Jim could absolutely go and buy the club. Now, financing the club, and this is just a headline view of financing the club. Now, what we have to realise and consider here is that Sir Jim would not be dipping into his £17 billion to buy this club. He would need to leverage debt against something. Frugal Boy says, good day. Hello, my friend. I hope you're doing extremely well. So when we're talking about buying stuff, there needs to be an understanding, as Scott has said here, between there are very, very few rich people. Now, we're talking about super, super rich, right? Is there are very, very few people who can have access to that sort of cash. So even though Sir Jim, £17 billion, even though his cash has dropped by 5, all it takes is a downturn in the market for Sir Jim to lose another 5. So if, for example, he bought the club in cash, so some of those assets, puts it down to 12, and then let's just say that then something happens and it goes down again by 5. So then this is why Sir Jim will not buy in cash. So Sir Jim will leverage it against something. There are 2 options here for Sir Jim. Sir Jim could leverage it against himself and his own assets. I don't know what he owns. He could leverage that against himself. He's not going to do that, because why would you leverage that against yourself? You would leverage it against something that you own. So you could leverage it against the club. And we're going to come into that, because that realistically is another option. Also, he could leverage it against Ineos, but Ineos at the moment their rating is BB. The overall debt is 12 billion. Imagine adding another 5 to that. That's 17 billion. I'd like him to leverage himself against me. Come on now, Amy. So, and there's also interest rates. So we need to factor in interest rates as well. So I think when we're thinking about Sir Jim, we need to take this cash option off of the table. As Scott says there, he doesn't want to own the club. Danny B, big up my friend. I think we need to realise, or I think you need to realise that what we're dealing with here are 2 separate things. Sir Jim is not cash rich. And when we're talking about Sir Jim, you need to take cash off of the table. You need to start talking about how is he going to finance this deal. So he can't leverage it and won't leverage it against himself. He's not going to leverage it against Ineos because he can't. Dino says, Lawrence, thank you, my friend. Dino says, what's happening, JB? We're talking about Sir Jim and why he cannot own this club. And we are talking about the ability not to own this club in terms of how we want to do it. And I'm going to go through the figures as well. Okay, so also what we need to think about as well is that Sir Jim, not only would he be using his assets or having to sell or leverage an asset to buy a club, he would then be taking on long-term debt. Sir Jim is my favourite subject. And Dino, and this is, I'm going to put this to bed today. I'm going to try to put this to bed because I until something happens, I want to put this to bed because these Sir Jim who can buy the club. Let's just get through this. So there is the debt as well. So once that's cleared, if for example he's going to leverage the debt against the club, there is still the current debt. So that would need to be refinanced, the current debt, the new debt, and don't forget, interest rates are not as low as they was. Look, if you think I'm lying, look, all this stuff is out there. This is all fact. Some of it is my opinion, but a lot of this is fact. So continue to listen. You may actually learn something. Also, United at the moment, in terms of a return for Sir Jim, if he's going to leverage the debt against this club, their revenue at the moment in this club records 665.3. United would then need to go on and earn another additional 150 million to 200 million pounds on top of what we've got now, with less games, Champions League football, more investment in the club as well, which is all okay if you've got cash. But this is what we're not. But this is what we will absolutely not do. Additionally, as well, the price that Sir Jim would pay, £5 billion, and look, Sir Jim may own a significant part, but that's different to what the Glazers would want. The Glazers would still want £5 billion. There's also the stadium to consider. Who's going to finance the stadium? Who's going to build the stadium? The stadium on top of the investment, on top of the leveraged debt that would have to take place. There would have to be infrastructure in place because the stadium will either need to be fixed. We are talking about £1 billion or £2 on that just to redo the stadium or build a brand new stadium. That is on top of the money that would have to be paid out. Again, we're talking about amortization. We're talking about new players, investment in the squad as well. And we have been highlighting and talking from a higher level on this, that we're not even talking about. We're just talking about Sir Jim buying the club. We're not talking about him, the permanent investment. We're not talking about the stadium. We're literally just talking about him buying the club in its current state. So here are the risk factors, and then we're going to get on to the figures. So Ineos's own debt and market conditions mean that it's absolutely ridiculous for them to take on even more debt. So the current debt roughly stands about £12 billion. If Sir Jim was going to leverage, even if Sir Jim was going to pay a part of this in his own cash and leverage the rest. So let's just say Sir Jim is going to go, right, okay, I'm going to put £1.5 billion towards the purchase, and then I'm going to put the rest against Ineos. That can't happen because Ineos have already got this BB against the club. Adding another 3 billion at least, another billion, 1.5 in stadium. The cash reserves are 1.8. Absolutely cannot. And Sir Jim is not going to leverage that against himself. So where's the only place that the debt can go is on the club. Jim in GDP is about 13.2 exactly. There has to be an leveraged debt comes at a price. Interest rates are absolutely ridiculous. All it takes for the market to go bust, and then suddenly that 2-3 billion pounds leveraged against the club potentially, then suddenly the interest payments from 237 million pounds per year could go up to like £500 million. And then what then happens is the club goes bust. I'll go to the next bit as well. So let me go through the chat, and then I'm gonna come through the best bit. The best bit. This is always my favourite bit. Oliver says it was confirmed by Whitwell that the drag along rights the Glazers have forced to sell Glazers $33 per share, which is values the clubs at 5.7 billion, and yet it was confirmed. Laurie Whitwell, that is fact that's out there. Whether Laurie or not confirms that, that's not him confirming it. That's just him spouting what everyone else says, right? That is out there. Now, yes, that does include that for Sir Jim, but Sir Jim will get his own money back, but the Glazers will still demand an additional £5 billion to sell their shares. So Sir Jim, as much as he owns X amount, the Glazers are still going to want £5 billion for themselves. So Sir Jim is going to have to find round about 4.8 billion to 5.2 billion pounds just to buy them out. So let's now talk about how the deal could be structured. Let's give some parameters around that. Let's give some headline figures and how Sir Jim could afford to do it. So Takeover roughly in pounds, and I think this is where we have to consider as a total package of debt, and we have to talk about debt. Hey JB, hello Tulip. Hope you're doing extremely well. Oliver, one factor to consider here is the £5 billion may not include the debt. Okay, that may be a separate issue. Okay, so the £5 billion that they want may not include the debt. So on the basis of that, we're talking roughly the takeover figure could be anywhere between 5.5 and 6.5 billion pounds. Okay, the current debt is roughly about 1.2 billion pounds. Annual income is 666 million. We've made a 33 million pound loss. Ratcliffe's personal wealth is about 17 billion pounds. Ineos is net debt is roughly about 12 billion pounds, and the EBITDA, so basically it's about 6.5. So which means that you can leverage your debt, and they're worth about 66.8 billion pounds. Interest rates are roughly about 6%, and Scott is exactly right. So exactly that. So if you add on never mind what Sir Jim paid, and on top of the purchase price and the debt, we are roughly talking about 6.5 billion pounds. So let's look at the three scenarios. Is number one, you can look at it from a conservative perspective where Sir Jim would put 40% cash in. Original member says, can't see what would make the Glazers want to sell. Whatever so drive them to find investment and to sell. Super League, new stadium will have changed. Now, I agree with you. I am in the camp, so I'll tell you where I'm at right now. I am in the opinion of investment. Why would the Glazers leave? Now, if you're looking at that as an overarching theme here, why would the Glazers leave? Now, Super League, the Super League is dead. Right now, I believe the Super League is dead. If you look at the Champions League, the format of that, a Super League would require, Madrid are itching around again. The Super League is on the basis that other clubs other than the Premier League clubs want in on it, right? United could be in it again, but I doubt it. Liverpool are not going to be there. Arsenal are not going to be there. City are not going to be there. So, in my opinion, right now the Champions League has washed that out. So I'm not too worried about that. The new stadium. Now, there's this thing about the stadium which I absolutely agree with. So there is the land around the stadium, but what this relies on is they're not suddenly just going to build a stadium and then basically they're going to have a load of money. They need somebody to build the stadium. Now the Glazers, if they wanted to put in their own cash to buy the stadium, this stadium could have started to be built. Now there is one flaw in the problem, is basically the freight line land, where they don't want to sell, and it's worth £50 million ish. They don't want to sell, and they certainly are not going to sell to that. They want hundreds of millions of pounds for that land. Now, yes, the government could possibly push them and to make that sell, but it's going to take time. And one of the factors here, one of the two main factors here for me, as to even though I'm with you, and I would say, look, I think the Glazers want investment. I think we could have a scenario, and this is where I'm at on it. I think we could be out of the frying pan and into the fire, because I think we could have a situation here where we have a triple threat of Ineos, UAE, and the Glazers working together. Maybe the Glazers will relinquish some of their rights, which basically means that nobody actually owns the club, and the three main players, the equal parts players, will be Glazers, Ineos, and UAE. So nobody has control over the club as such, but they all share that, right? Then UAE will come in and own the stadium, clear the debt. Now I'll explain to you why that could happen. And basically they basically own the stadium. You know, they'll give a percentage. Look, because all of basically the Glazers don't care, right? And I think what we got to understand here is the Glazers never put a penny of their own money into this club. So what they make, they're interested in is, and what most people do is when you buy something to make cash off, as long as you get some money back, the Glazers would be more than happy to sit on this club for 100 years and make £100 million a year. That's all they care about. The fact that they can sell it and make a load of money off of it, inconsequential. They would much prefer to let Qatar, UAE take the debt, and there's a reason why they would take that debt. So if, for example, they took the debt and they built the stadium, they were talking of they probably have to pump in, £3 billion, right? They would make that back as soon as the stadium is built. The revenue, not just from football, because we need to think about that this is going to be a global powerhouse. This is going to be entertainment. This is going to be NFL. This is going to be a sports mega. It's going to be basically like a theme park. The amount of money that they will make every season, that they will more than make that back. And also, they're not going to mind paying off of the debt just to have the brand. Like, when you've got so much money, sometimes you will pay the premium just to get the brand. But also, when you factor in the cost, £3.4 billion to them in the long term, they're not stupid. They will make that money back. They will make that money 2 or 3 times more, because it's not just the money that will come back from the area, it's the brand. It's the brand all over the world. So absolutely have no problem in paying off the debt and making that money back. They will within a year, they'll break even on that debt. They'll break even on that debt, and they will make so much money out of it. So it is not a problem. And it's because they have cash. Okay. The reason why they can do it is because they have cash, and cash is king. So they would never leverage debt or leverage an asset to buy debt. That doesn't make sense at all. So because they have cash, yes, it's an outlay and they've spent the cash and that's a sunk cost, but they will break even on that very, very quickly, and they'll still have their assets. So they have no issue at all. So let's get through some of this as well. So scenario 2 is that a conservative estimate would say that 40% cash, Sir Jim, £2.6 billion, 60% leveraged against the club. However, he would still need to maintain and put cash into the club. A balanced view would he'd put 30% into the club in cash, 1.95 billion pounds, 70% servicing the debt, 4.55 billion pounds, or aggressively would only put 20% of his cash in and leverage 5.2 billion against something or the club, which is extremely high risk. So what would that mean is, as an initial debt, unless Sir Jim is going to leverage the debt against himself, so which basically means that he's going to leverage 3.9 billion pounds in the conservative, in the balanced 4.55 billion or 5.2 billion pounds. He's going to have to leverage that debt somewhere. He's not going to pay cash. So where does he leverage that debt? Does he leverage it against himself? I'm guessing not. Ineos, it can't be done because they don't have the ability at the moment to do that. So the only place that this could go is against the club. Okay, so there are two options here. He either leverages this debt against himself, he either buys the club in cash, which billionaires do not do, or he leverages it against the club. And the reason why he could leverage this against the club is once he gets the backing of somebody to basically regenerate the land, he can then project future income. So when you for example, you start like a company and you go to the bank and say, look, I want a loan based on the fact that these are my projections for the next 3 years. He will project the next 3 to 4 years, or even the next 5 to 6 years, that this club will be worth 3 times that. So next point in this. So if, for example, and we need to think about this at a debt level, so at a leveraged debt, 3.9 billion pounds a year would mean interest payments at 6% of 234 million pounds a year. Now, if this was leveraged against the club, we would be paying 234 million pounds a year in leveraged debt. 4.55 billion pounds a year would mean 273 million pounds a year in debt. And at 5.2 billion pounds leverage against the club, we would have to find interest of 312 million pounds a year. Now, in all of these scenarios, whether you leverage that debt against himself, whether he leverages that debt against the club or Ineos at the moment are 235 million pounds a quarter. So that would be an extra roughly about 50 something million pounds extra on top of that debt per quarter. So their debt per quarter would go up to 300 million pounds. So this is why when we start talking about these figures and how Sir Jim would start to own this club, unless he pays for it in cash, and I'm adamant on this that he will not get that cash to do this. This is what we need to talk about. This is about the leveraging that debt and where that would go. So what that would mean, and we're thinking about this in terms of a leveraged debt against the club. So if Sir Jim was to do this against the club, our current operating losses or our loss each year would be 267 million pounds a year in the conservative. In the balance would be 306 million pounds a year, and on the aggressive would be 345 million pounds a year paid out before anything else. So this is why the club would need to make over 200-300 million pounds more just to service that debt. Additional investment into the club as well. So the rebuild of our current club or a refurb, £2 billion, between 1.5 and 2 billion pounds. That is to rebuild the club. The club from top to bottom, to rebuild the stadium, 1.5 to 2 billion pounds. Now, how we extend, we'd need to, again with the freight line there would need to go. So that's going to cost money as well. But I believe that we'd be looking at completely refurbishing the whole of that ground. So we are talking about billions of pounds here. Carrington has upgraded, but that will need more. The debt repayment would need to be cleared as well. So we're talking about I think it's £800 million. You were looking at reinvestment in the squad every single year of £200 million at least. And we're talking about catching up here. We're not even talking about catching up. We're talking about just to basically service this squad to be competitive each year. We're talking a bit between 150 to 200. So in terms of and if we're now looking at a summary table of financial risk and factoring, right, and the factors. So feasibility of Sir Jim being able to buy this club, 100%. His net worth is reported to be between 17 and 25 billion pounds. I think it's roughly about 17. He would need to go and sell chunks of his wealth and buy the club. That's a fact. If Sir Jim went to do that, then he could absolutely buy the club. Billionaires don't traditionally do that. Now, if Sir Jim is a lifelong fan and that's what he chooses to do, I will take my hat off. But I will be absolutely staggered if Sir Jim will have the ability and able to sell £5 billion of assets without impacting his portfolio, his wealth, without taking a massive hit, taking that £5 billion and spending it on the club. Now, a lifelong fan would absolutely. So Sir Jim could easily sell chunks of his assets and go and buy the club if he was a lifelong fan. And I would question, once he did that, then all of this leverage debt stuff goes out the window, and it would probably in the long run be the best interests of this club to do that. So if Sir Jim had the best interests of the club at heart and wanted to do that, he could quite easily go and buy this club. Risk. Now, there is a massive financial risk. Where this would go, in my opinion, was there would be some sort of leverage debt against Ineos. Ineos already between 9 billion and 12 billion pounds worth of debt. I think 13 billion pounds worth of debt. Adding another 5 billion onto that their rating would plummet again. That they would absolutely, and the way Ineos are right now, the projections are not great. Additional investment. So whatever happens, there's going to have to be some sort of loan here, because even if Sir Jim was to buy this club for £5 billion, if you're talking another £2 or £3 billion to invest, Sir Jim would have to invest £8 billion of his own money, and we're probably talking more than that. So he would need to liquidate probably 50%, 40% of his net worth, of his assets, to buy the club. He's not going to do that. There's also implication in terms of tax implications. As you make profit from your assets that you sell, there are capital gains to pay on that as well. So we are talking 40% of his worth, but also as well, if he sells his assets at a gain, we are talking potentially here. We are talking about capital gains as well. There's a tax implications for him as well. Long term wise, if Sir Jim buys this club and does all of that, he could actually make some money, right? Because if you're going to do these things, and yes, it's a massive investment, but in the long term, especially if you get the stadium, particularly if you do the land, particularly if you regenerate and you do all those things as you plan to do, and that site, and as a spectacle, it will make hundreds of millions of pounds per year, and it will make him a lot of money. But that's long-term risk. That's such a long-term risk for Sir Jim to risk. He's not a young man anymore. I'm not suggesting that he's not fit, but for him to really realistically see gain from that investment, it's going to take a long time. So if he did it, if he did it today, then and Sir Jim wanted to be an absolute real fan of this club, and he really wanted to buy this club, he could absolutely do it, but it would be at personal cost to him. So whilst we're talking about to the mere mortals like us, billions and billions of pounds seems like loads and loads of money, but when you are dealing with business and when you're dealing with billions and billions and billions of pounds, when you have an asset that fluctuates, and when you're having to deal with the likes of the Glazers, who want over and above the market rate because of potentially what you could do with it. Now, if Sir Jim decided to buy the club for £5 billion, he would be forced, he'd be absolutely forced into regenerating, because the reason why the Glazers want so much money is because of the potential. If you don't, you're paying them for the work that they haven't done, and they're saying to you, look, you're going to potentially make billions and billions of pounds. We want a fraction of that money, but as an outlay, when you're having to leverage and sell your stuff, it's a big thing to do. So this is why Sir Jim can absolutely, in my opinion, can't be allowed to buy a club, because I think the leverage debt against this club will be exponentially higher. There could be a situation where you leverage the debt against both of the club and Ineos as well, so they have a split leverage debt as well. So I look, the worst thing for this club, unless I'm wrong, the caveat to the whole of this is that if Sir Jim is a lifelong fan, he will sell some assets and buy this club. And I think that what we need, and the reason why it's so important for somebody to come in with cash, buy the Glazers out, get everyone out in cash and get rid of this debt, is because if we want to survive and not on debt, that is the only way to do it. Sir Jim does have the capability, but whether the appetite is there or not, I don't think it is. And I think the only way that Sir Jim can buy the club, as we've said there, is basically through more leverage debt. But where that leverage debt lands, Ineos can't take it. Will Sir Jim take it? I don't know. But the club can't take any more debt. So that is where we are on that. Let me come through more of the chat. Are you a finance expert? I've never seen this channel before. When we say finance expert, I'm a trained accountant. I work in finance. Am I a finance football expert? No, but I know how to read. I know and I understand some stuff. So, and again, this is just based on the things that I've known, the things that I've read, the things that I've seen, and based on some scenarios on a model that I put together. If Sir Jim wants to liquid, then it would have to be 50 to 60% of the high taxes. Exactly, Scott. The moment that Sir Jim makes a profit on anything, that is when the tax. Now, obviously, depends on where he sits in the world. And additionally, as well, is I'm not quite up on my international finance, but depending on where his money sits, for him to take a big chunk of money out of a country, there might be stuff on that as well. So my face is looking sharp today, mate. Thank you very much, my friend. Absolutely, thank you. It's a work day for me, so I'm doing a work plus stream shift today. So guys, let me know what you think about that. Let me know if you want me to go over some stuff. Let me know. I wanted to put this over. What do you think of the rumours of United going for Bellingham? Yes, so Joe Bellingham. So we spoke about this yesterday. What I think about that is this, right? There's two ways, in my opinion, to look at this. Is number one, looking at the player, right? So you look at the player and you go, is Joe got some potential? Yes. Okay. My only problem with that is, unless Amrin really, really wants him, he's not going to play. Like, what's the difference? So my question back to you would be, what's the difference between Mainu and Joe Bellingham? I don't, and when I say that, I'm not necessarily talking about playing styles. I'm talking about age. I'm talking about what they would bring to the team. I think Mainu's the better player. I think Mainu's more experienced. If Mainu can't get into the side, Bellingham is not going to get into the side. And right now, I don't want to outlay any sort of cash unless it's for a first team experienced player. So I think there probably is some truth in there. Do I ultimately think it's real? No. And I'm with Scott. I think it would be an absolute waste of money. I think it would be an absolute waste of time to buy a position where I don't think he'll play. Secondly, and I wish this is what we need to do more of as a club, is that when we look at these players, the diligence that we need to do on these players is more. So we need to look at the player, his attitude. We need to look at how he is within club. We also need to look at his family. Now, allegedly, I've never met the guy, but from all the reports I've seen and heard, this could be grossly exaggerated. But his dad, apparently, his dad is an issue. There are issues in terms of ego. What sometimes happens is when you have a son or sons who are professional players and they become very, very good, there's an ego involved here. So I kind of think that I don't want the Bellinghams anywhere near the club. We don't need any more of these egotistical players or their entourage to come to this club thinking that they're bigger than this club. So, if Joe didn't want to come here originally, and if Amrin didn't want him to come here, then as far as I'm concerned, I think right now, I think that's a bullet that we need to dodge. Joe will be at Madrid soon enough. Potentially Scott, I don't think he's as good. I don't think he is. I've seen him play a couple of times. I don't know, Scott. I mean, you may have seen him more than me. I don't necessarily think he's as good as Jude Bellingham. But Madrid may be forced into not forced, but they may be persuaded into to sign him. And Scott, yeah, I agree. I think he's a good player. I'm by no means saying that he's not a good player. I just think that he's not of the level yet. He could jump up levels. But my concern here is not just the player. It's the toxicity that we can't land into this club. So for me, look, I just don't see the value in it now. But again, please feel free to let me know. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about was apparently now there's more unrest in United, which Amorim again is apparently it's been reported today is a bust up again. So as we probably predicted, and as we know, just get me Valverde. Look, Scott, if UAE takeover or consortium comes to take over this club, anything's possible. Anything will be possible. So I would say to you, you're probably closer to your dream than you've ever been in getting the players that you want in. So let's talk about this. So apparently now there is more unrest. Ugarte, I believe, is now sort of at the centre of this as well. That he's not getting the playing time. Look, we can let me know. Let me know what you think about that. So, there is midfield unrest, obviously. Is this player? Okay, so this is World Cup year. Scott says spin, 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 spin. Do I think it's spin? I do think it's spin. Do I think there are some unhappy campers? Of course, right. If I was Martin Fay says, we hope that children of the Glazers family are smarter and more considerate people than their fathers. It's hard to see the Glazers moving, mate. Do you think this could actually happen? I think and again, Mark, I'm happy to go back to talk about this again because this is the show, right? Is that when you were brought up, okay, you are a product. Most people, okay, you're a product of your environment. You're a product in terms of business as well, right? The sons carry the sins of the father. The kids are exactly like Malcolm Glazer, right? They've got a model that works. Okay, so if you are a billionaire, you have to be obsessed with money. You've got to be, right? There is no way that the Glazer family, unless because you got to think about it, you come to a certain lifestyle, right? The more money you have, the more money that you spend. That's life. So the Glazers are not, and their children are not suddenly going to become these kind human beings who are going to go, do you know what? We don't need this club. We will give back to the fans, because we are a nice people. Now, I'm not saying that they're not nice people. Okay, they're not nice business people. There is a separation that has to happen in some respects. I think when you're a billionaire, I think pretty much if you're a horrible business person, you pretty much are like a horrible person, because don't have any illusion here. There are very seldom nice people who have lots and lots of money. By the nature of how you have to get your money, you have to be that way inclined. Now, I'm not saying everybody, like Sir Jim may come across maybe sometimes, Sir Jim, yes. Have no doubt that Sir Jim is ruthless. Have no doubt Sir Jim is a very intelligent, very ruthless man. There is no way you get to where he has enough by being nice. Okay, so their families and children are not going to be nice. Where the hope lies is that this doesn't work anymore. Where the hope dries in this deal is that what you got to understand is, and I've explained it, if you've got a well full of water, right, and if you leave it alone and you respect it and you only take what you need from the well, and it will replenish itself, right? What the Glazers have done is they've taken more than they needed every single year, and they've never put back. They've taken it. Now, eventually, as much as it will replenish itself over the months and over the years, unless you put back into it, it will never get back up to the same thing. What they've done is they've put so much debt onto this club, right? And I'm talking about it just in terms of the overall debt. Imagine your business is doing really, really well, but the debt is nearly as much as the money that you make. So you could make £1 billion, but if your debt is nearly £1 billion, then there's no difference in a smaller. So let's just say you make £1 billion a year. Your debt is £999 million, right? So you've got £1 million left, right? But you're £1 billion business. What's the difference between a smaller business that makes £3 billion a year and their outgoings are £2 billion a year? Your profit is still the same. Now, yes, of course, you can argue the size of the business, the brand, and that sort of stuff. But ultimately, the reason why they would sell is because they can't take anything out of this club. There's nothing left to take. So even when we were, say, making £600 million before, and our debt was higher, but if say we were making like £100 million a year and we were making that money, they could take cash out at the club, right? They can't do that because we're making a loss. So there's actually, other than the value of the club, there's nothing left for them to take. So the whole reason why they've got this asset is to take 20-30 million pounds a year out the club. They don't have to do anything for that money. It's done and dusted. It's there. They can't even do that now. So the only way they'll be able to do that is to reduce that debt. And how they're going to reduce that debt is investment. they need somebody to come in and clear that debt. Once that debt is cleared, they can start to take cash out of the club again. They won't have to service the debt. But right now, with the debt, the just overall debt, they can't take anything out of the club. So what's the only thing that they can do? The only option left for them is to sell that asset. Now, to bear in mind, they bought this club on debt. You've not paid a penny. They will make £5 billion. And when I say make, I don't mean you take £5 billion and you take off of the debt. They'll make £5 million. That debt is not going to come with them. The debt is attached to the club. So they're not taking the debt with them. So imagine they've leveraged a football club for debt, will never paid a single penny of their own cash towards buying the club or servicing that debt, and they'll walk away with £5 billion. So this is why they might sell, because unless they can get investment, which I think that this is for me, it's about investment. This is about a triple threat. What they want is they want Sir Jim to run the football side. They want UAE to come in and run the infrastructure side. So they'll do all the building. They will build and own the stadium. They will service the debt. They will pay off the debt, but they will make that money back. And Ineos will be the silent partner who does nothing, sits back, and on their 30% or 29% will sit back. They will still have an asset that's worth £2 billion. Right? Their shares will probably still be worth about £1 billion or £2, and they will make hundreds of £1 million a year. That is what they want. That is where I'm at on it. But it's whether or not they can get that investment. And if they don't, then I do think that they're trying to line up for some sort of sale. Dino says, Ugarte just isn't good enough. I agree with you. Ineos just lost 11 billion. Exactly. There's a fixed scale, right, which basically gives your company, I think it's like a AAA or an A rating. That's where you want to be. That Ineos at the moment are BB, which basically means there's a warning against the company because their cash reserves for how big they are really, really low. The dividends that they normally would take, that's been cancelled. So Ineos are in a bad way. You know, people misunderstand when something is worth £66 billion. It doesn't mean that's the cash. That means that that's what they are. You know, when you then take into account sales, you get a fraction of that. I mean, okay, you probably get, you know, like 55 million, but by the time you factor in costs of sales of the assets, and you factor in the depreciation, and you factor in all that sort of stuff, and like the taxes and that sort of stuff, you know, £66 billion basically is better for them to leverage down. Is there cash flow? Exactly. Metaphor? Exactly. Cutthroat. Glazers is never about football. It's all about the money. Exactly that. Sunday's going to be a fun day. I hope so. I need to go back on holiday again. I need to go away as well, my friend. So we openly full sell. I think at the moment, yeah, I hope so, Martin. I mean, look, I mean, I am by no means an intrinsically like forensic expert in this, but I am a trained accountant. You know, I do look at this stuff. I mean, you know, I'm sure a football expert financier can tell you a lot more than me. This is just like the headline stuff. And this stuff is out there, and a lot of this is basically common sense in terms of, you know, the way that businesses do stuff and like to structure things. So yes, it's a really fascinating thing. So yeah, I mean, look, guys, give me your opinions. You know, I'm hoping that something will come up today. Looking at the share price, I think the share price has slightly dipped as well. I think the yesterday, I think all this stuff that come out, and you're right, Mike. You know, was it Martin that said that? You know, so there are different options, and I think we need to be open to this. Number one, load of crap. right? Nothing's going to happen, and it's just one of those things that's been taken out of context because of some guy in Saudi who's running his mouth, and actually nothing's going to happen. All right. Number two, this is because there is a clause in there, and looking at 2027, that's Sir Jim, the guaranteed value of his shares could drop. So there is a value. Exactly, Scott. Exactly. And when you sell stuff, there is a fair market price as well. So when you're looking at stuff as well, particularly around like an asset, there is a what is the actual thing worth? So you let's just say Ineos, £66 billion, right? If they sold all of those assets, they're probably not. They may make a profit on some of that stuff, but they're probably not going to make as much as that. They could do, depending on what the asset is and what the asset does. Maybe some of those assets are undervalued. You don't know. There are projects on top of that as well, so there may be some assets that are not quite ready yet. So there's all that to consider, but you probably find that they won't make £66 billion. That figure is really important though, is when you're trying to buy stuff and you're trying to buy stuff on debt. It's looking like for the holiday one, it's say 2, 3, and the next day. Exactly that. There are so many market factors as well. Ineos are in chemicals and that kind of stuff as well. It could be anything could increase the value. Interest rates. Interest rates on their debts could absolutely destroy them. It could be there's an opportunity in the market, the valuation could increase. So it's a very, Ineos are going through this stage now where they could absolutely lose some more value, but the reason where they are right now, the valuation of BB is not great. So this could be the reason. This could be the reason why that both parties need to vacate, need to start again. So this could be a perfect storm. This could be an absolute perfect storm whereby, because of the situations in the market conditions, because Ineos have run the world dry, because the Glazers have run the world dry, Ineos ultimately, what we're going to find out ultimately here is how much of a lifelong fan Sir Jim is. Is Sir Jim prepared to sell a significant proportion of his wealth to buy the club and sustain the club? And this is what we're going to see. The Glazers have allowed so much money into transfers, but we've bought garbage. Kevin, and that is a good point, but Kevin, I think the important point here is that it's not the Glazers' money. I think this is such an important thing that gets lost. Is the Glazers have exactly, Kevin, exactly. They have. I think, to go back to your point, I think, Kevin, it is, mate. Like, Kevin, right? Imagine this, Kevin, right? You could go and buy something with someone else's money, right? You then buy that thing, and not only does it pay you millions of pounds per year, the loan money per month that it costs just to have it, a loan fee, you don't pay it. So you don't pay the loan fee, but you make money on it. And then in 20 years' time, you're going to make £5 billion out of it. The Glazers, I absolutely, in terms of business, like acumen and sense, I tip my hat to them. Absolutely, what a phenomenal piece of business to do. If you take out the emotion, take out the club, take all that stuff out as the business transaction, imagine buying something with someone else's money, not even have to pay a loan fee, you get paid for doing it, and then in 20 years, you sell it for 100 times more than what it is ridiculous. Jim can only afford to buy champers. Scott, this is why Ineos are skint. The amount of money that Sir Jim has spent on champers, the amount of money that man must, I think he baths in it. The amount of money that he spends in it is absolutely ridiculous. Fletch says Ineos are waiting for Andy Burnham to replace Starmer and get funding for the circus tent. And Fletch, that's a very, very good point. And again, Fletch, that is a really, really valid point because it adds into the conversation here. All right. And the conversation here is that unless Ineos get the funding, and Fletch, mate, you spot on. I think what really, really spot on, because I do think that adds into this, and I've not mentioned that as a consideration either, is that unless Ineos get the permission and the funding within the time frame that they need, there's no point in them being here. Because if they can't get that within a time frame, they might as well just take their money and run. I mean, they're going to make £5 billion. That is what they're going to make. Bearing in mind, let's just say, for example, they didn't sell the club, right? The club is in debt. Let's just say, as Fletch says there, they build the stadium. How long is that going to take? 7 years, right? So for 7 years, depending on how the club does, they're probably not going to make that much money out of the club. And then when the club does then, say in the first year or two, probably say it's going to take 3 years, because they're going to have to pay the stadium back. They're going to have to do stuff. So let's just say it takes them 5 years, right? 7 years to build, 5 years. In 12 years' time, that's when they're going to start to make hundreds of millions of pounds. Are they going to make £5 billion? How long, when the stadium is built to when the funds start to come in, how long will it take them to make £2.5 billion each, right? I reckon it probably take them another 20 years. So is it a case of they're thinking, look, it's going to take so long to build the stadium that for us to make that money back, it's probably worth us just doing it now. It's going to save us hard work. It's going to save us time, and we can pretty much get that back now, and we can go and do something else. So I think that is I think a lot of it hinges on that as well. So I think Fletch, I think that as a comment, brilliant comment to make, my friend. Ineos are 11 billion in debt, so Sir Jim can't afford to buy United. John, exactly that. Kevin McGee, yes, I'll do it. But it doesn't change. The Glazers are only a small part of the problem over the last. I think, Kevin, in my opinion, and I respect that view, Kevin, the Glazers are the problem. In my view, the Glazers are the biggest problem. I think they're not us. The Glazers are not a small part, and the reason why I say that is because of the people that the Glazers have hired, the money that they've spent badly. They've not looked after the stadium. They've not looked after the club. Everything goes back to them. Wilcox came out and said it when he joined. There was no a link between the management, the ownership, the players. The Glazers, for me, are the issue, my friend. But again, I do respect the opinion. Champers, if the club has been run better over the last 10 years, I think we'd have bought better people, wouldn't be so upset with the Glazers. Look, Kevin, my friend, I love the fact, Kevin, that you are trying to see the best. I love it. I do. I think, Kevin, I think it's a very, very mature opinion. And I like look, when it comes to the Glazers, and this club, I am very much of the opinion that the Glazers are the devils, the Glazers are the issues. I fully appreciate other people's opinions, right? If the Glazers, if there was an attempt, even if the Glazers never put their own money into this club, all right, but from the money that we earned, there was an attempt to pay off the debt. There was an attempt, and they didn't take money out of the club. They just let the club run itself, right? If there was an attempt to pay off the debt, there was an attempt to hire the right people, there was an attempt to do all of the right things to look after the stadium, I would have been inclined to agree that the Glazers wouldn't be so bad, but none of that's happened. And it's not just 10 years, it's 20 years, my friend. I agree with you, Mary. I hope you're doing extremely well. Do you have any expertise here? Sounds like guesses on figures. No, Will. I'm an accountant by trade. Everything I've said is based on what's out there. Everything is based on fact. I've got some stuff from the Financial Times. I can tell you exactly where I've got it all from. Some of this is from the Financial Times. Some of this is from the club itself. Some of this is from the EPL Index. Some of this is from the Independent. Some of this is from Sky Sports. Some of this is from Matchday Finance. I'll happily tell you where everything is from, my friend. This is something that I've put together based on what I've found out there. Maybe some of the figures fluctuate, right? Based on different outlets, based on like currencies and that sort of stuff, mate. But these are all figures, that it could be, instead of Ineos being in like 13 billion pounds of debt, it could be 11.5 now. It could be 12, but the ballparks are there. So, mate, I've basically been through, and when we say guess, mate, I'm not plucking these figures out of my arse. I'm not guessing that Ineos are worth 66 billion pounds. It's not a guess that they're 12 billion pounds in debt. It's not a guess that their Fitch, the rating is BB. I didn't pluck that out of my arse. They are 1.8 billion pounds in debt. That's not plucked from my arse. The dividends are not be. It's all there. Go and look at Ineos. Their financial statements are all there, my friend. And all of the figures here as well. And okay, the only point that I'll concede is the metric based on the model that I built. It's just a projection based on the debt levels that are out there and based on some of the things that I think. But the overall figures are there. The stats and figures from the clubs are there or thereabouts, and Ineos is there or thereabouts. And so Jim is these are not figures that are hush hush. You just got to do your homework, and I've done my homework. Exactly. Most of the billionaires have got 7. Exactly, Scott. And the difference is, and the different here is that a lot of theirs, Scott, as well, is cash. It's cash based as well. So Will says respect. Thank you, Will. I appreciate that, my friend. Minecraft says Arsenal are first in the league. Debt is leverage. Radcliffe is playing a risky game, but disagree, Samuel. I disagree, Samuel. If you do the figures, right, Sir Jim can leverage debt, right? He's playing a risky game. Agreed with you. But there are only 3 places that he can leverage that debt, really, unless there is another business that we don't know about. And as I say, I'm not a forensic accountant, and I don't know everything that Sir Jim does. But there are only three realistic places that he can leverage the debt. Number 1, himself. Billionaires do not leverage debt against themselves. And also, why would he liquidate his assets to buy the club? That's not going to happen. If it does, I will put my hands up to Sir Jim and clap him, because I think that will be an amazing thing to do. Ineos cannot take on any more debt. They're £12 billion in debt. They cannot be leveraged anymore. Their rating as a company is already low, and there are warnings out against them. The cash reserves, £1.8 billion, which sounds like a lot, which is not for a company of that size. They're not taking money for their shareholders out of the company. You cannot leverage it against them. United cannot leverage that money against them. There is no, that to service that debt would be hundreds of million pounds per year, up from the, 50 million pounds. It would be hundreds of millions of pounds a year. So, Samuel, what I'm going to ask you then is, how does Sir Jim, other than Sir Jim, getting additional investment, right? So unless Sir Jim can get investors together as well to chip in. So for example, he basically says like, I'll chip in 1.2 billion, someone else. Sir Jim on his own, I don't understand how he buys this club. As long as there is a market, then there will be willing institutions and investment willing to lend him the money. Yeah, but Samuel, you're missing the point, right? I get it. I'm not arguing against leveraged debt. I'm not arguing against loans. Sir Jim could do that, but where does the leverage sit? You can take a loan, but who owns the loan? Where does the debt sit? Where does the loan sit? I'm not arguing here. Like, you could get United fans together, all of our incomes, and we could leverage debt to buy the club. But where does that debt sit? That what I'm asking you is, other than investment, other than Sir Jim getting additional investment to buy the club, if say you got investment from like 100 people and everybody had to take out loans, where does the debt sit? Someone has to own the debt, and these people are not going to leverage debt against themselves. So where does the debt sit? The debt is going to either sit against the club or have to sit against a company, and the only company, Ineos, cannot take on the debt. The only way that this happens right now is if Sir Jim liquidates his assets, and I'm talking about Sir Jim here. He would need to liquidate his assets or find a way to leverage a debt that's not against Ineos and not against this club. Saudi and Qatar is oil, exactly trillions of pounds. We know there's interest already, and this is what I'm saying, Samuel. Look, right. And this is one of the options. And Samuel, I'm not talking about Saudi here. This video is not about investment from Saudi. This video is talking about Sir Jim, specifically for all the Sir Jim fans. Let's not shift the conversation to, but there's Saudi and there's Qatar. I've spoken about that. I absolutely fully agree with that. We're talking about Sir Jim. Let's not shift this and Saudi and that. No. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about lifelong Sir Jim, the fan of this club, the saviour of this club, cannot afford to buy this club. Now, Qatar and Saudi is a different conversation completely. I'm of the opinion that that's what the Glazers and Sir Jim want. They want investment in this club to clear the debt and to fund the stadium build. And that is something different. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking specifically about Sir Jim, the saviour, the local lad, and why he cannot afford to buy the club. We have two owners. One doesn't want to spend, and the other who's broke. Exactly. Is this live, Kiwi? Yes, it is. Hey, JB, you are focused on Ineos with Samuel. I am. Yeah, but Mercedes AMG, he can't leverage the debt against them. This is Ineos. I'm not forgetting Mercedes. He can't leverage the debt against them. He's not going to leverage the debt against them. Ineos are here at the club, not Mercedes. If then Mercedes come in, that's a completely different company. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the fact that Ineos are the ones that and this is what Sir Jim has been talking about. This is what Ineos are here. Mercedes AMG are nothing to do with this. If that comes in, then that's something else. And this is what I just said, is that if there's another place to leverage the debt, another company like Mercedes, would they do that? That is a potential. But the point I'm making here is the debt still has to be leveraged in a place. Exactly. Resign Sir Alex Ferguson. Yes, you can leverage the debt against them. Yeah, but Samuel, I mean, I don't look. Can somebody tell me right now how much Mercedes AMG is worth? In fact, I'm going to look it up right this second because I have the ability to do that. How much is Mercedes AMG Petronas worth? Okay, so apparently, according to this, the F1 team is worth 3.4 billion US dollars. Okay, so I'm coming back on that, right? So you're telling me that he's going to sell the F1 team for, I don't know what that converts to, $2 billion. That's not going to touch the sides. You're right. But this is what I'm saying. This is what I've been saying, is that unless Sir Jim, and this is what I've been saying, and you're trying to nitpick it down because I can tell that you're a Sir Jim fan, is that he would have to start liquidating his assets. If he sells the F1 team, do you think he sells it for £2 billion and then basically the government go, yeah, go on, you can have that money? There are taxes involved. There are so many different capital gains involved here. There are so many different things involved that he could sell the F1 team, but that's £2 billion. How does he then leverage the other three? And Samuel, we're not just talking about £5 billion. He's going to have to find about £8 billion pounds here, right? We're talking pounds. So he's going to have to find £8 billion to not only buy the Glazers out for £5 billion. That's not including the debt. That's another 1.2. He's going to have to then fund the stadium, fund the team. So we're talking £8 billion. Where's Sir Jim going to leverage all of that debt from? Is he going to sell his assets? And this is what I've always spoken about on here, and this is what I've just said, right? Can Sir Jim, can he buy the club? Yes. But he will need to sell his assets. He will need to liquefy and sell his assets to get money cash-wise to buy the club, or he can leverage the debt. Where does he leverage debt? He can't leverage the debt against the F1 team because it's not big enough. If they risk them to invest money, they can turn around and say, why should we invest in them when I can just buy the whole club and make profit? Exactly. Can you explain the Mercedes link? So basically, I mean, Sir Jim is, I don't know the intrinsic level of what he owns in Mercedes F1, but what we're talking about here is how can Sir Jim afford to buy this club? Now, I think that Samuel has raised some good points, has absolutely raised some fantastic points here. But the point of it is, Sir Jim, for United to be sustainable, to be owned correctly without leveraging more debt against this club, Sir Jim would need to buy this club in cash. He doesn't have 8 billion in cash. He would need to sell assets, and he would have to sell Mercedes or part of that. I don't know what his profit in. I don't know what his share of that is, and sort of like who owns that. But that's simply just not going to be enough. Exactly, Scott. Just take the money, 3.9 billion. Exactly what I just said is an easy couple of billion. Disagree, Samuel, mate. Look, I don't know what school of economics or school that you've been to, mate. Is that you can't, you sell stuff. I get it, right? But mate, for you to liquefy and get 8 billion of cash, it's going to cost you more than that, mate. But how much debt can you leverage on 3 billion? But it really okay. But you're talking about £3 billion, right? Yeah. Okay. But you've got to look at the ability to service that debt, right? So let's just say the profit on that. Okay. Let me just again. Let me just look at that. Let's just look at that. Okay. Okay. Right. So this, look at this, right? So their profit, so bearing in mind, okay, so they made £636 million last year, and profit-wise, they made 126. So if you're looking to leverage that, so you'd need to take your net profit off of the value, and then times it by. I can't remember the calculation off of my head, but you're not going to leverage. You're not going to leverage more. You wouldn't even get close to £1 billion. You're talking hundreds of millions of pounds. So you're not going to be able to leverage £1 billion of debt against a £3 billion company. That's 33.33% of the value of that club, of that team. It's just not going to do it. You leverage lots of debt on £3 billion as an accountant. Yeah, but Samuel, I know that. But what I'm saying to you is that if Sir Jim needs five in cash or 5 to buy it, you're not going to be able. There is no way you're going to be. Well, you could do, but the risk is high. Are you going to leverage your company worth £3 billion with £1 billion worth of debt, 33.3% of the value at 6% on a risk? I don't think you are, mate. Exactly. Look, he's just talking. He's just talking it up. He's worth 17 billion. Kiwi, he is. But what you got to understand, there's a difference between being worth in assets and what you can get out in terms of cash. It is a massive red flag. 100%. I just have to feel he's. So you, yes, yeah, so Samuel. Sadly, I don't think he likes being told. Yeah, Samuel, I don't think you like being put in your place, mate. I think. Look, Samuel, Samuel, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not disagreeing. Basically, that Sir Jim can leverage debts against stuff, but there's not enough of it out there for him to leverage it. There is no way as a say a third party or a third sponsorship being able. So let's just say he owns a third of Mercedes. Say it's worth £1 billion. He's not going to be able to leverage 50%. Okay, let's look at it, Samuel, from a logical perspective. If he owns a third of it, right, and his value is £1 billion, no sane, no well-run company is going to leverage, even at 500 million, is going to leverage 500 million, 50% of the value of the company against it, and unless it's for them. So, for example, then United would then have to give money to Mercedes as an investment in Mercedes. It's just not going to happen. It's just, Samuel, look, mate, just logically think about it. It's just not going to happen. Do you think this international window kills the flow of the Premier League? Look, England for me, boring as shit. I think it does. I think Kiwi, I think you're spot on. I think what it does, my friend, is I think it absolutely ruins. I do, Kiwi, I think it ruins momentum. I do. It can also increase it. So Liverpool's momentum was bad. Can it improve now that they've come back from a break? Sam says United fans are too easy to piss off, but honestly speaking, Sir Jim is one of the best things to happen to your club. Money is not a concern, and he has never stated it has been. Samuel, you just expose yourself. Look, mate, you just expose yourself. You clearly have no idea what you're talking about financially. That's obvious. You know, if Sir Jim, you know, people talk about Sir Jim's investment into this club, mate. If you knew anything, then what you would know that Sir Jim's investment in this club is basically to just make sure that the asset is sustainable. He's not here to invest in this playing squad. He's here to invest in the asset. And if you look at the money that he spent and where he spent it, any person with any sort of financial nous would know what he's doing. He's basically just trying to, because legally and from a tax perspective, you can upgrade and you can improve or upkeep your asset, and there are tax breaks in there or whatever else. So if you're looking at it from a financial perspective as to where that money's gone and to where the money's been spent, if you think that Sir Jim is the best thing that's happened to this club, I wouldn't want to be money managed by you, my friend. Let's have a little look. We'll be back here on Sunday. How's things going on the lunch break, Wayne? It's been an interesting thing. It's been an interesting one today, talking about Sir Jim and how I don't think he can afford the club. You know, based on the evidence and our arguments here. I mean, I'd love somebody to come back and tell me that I'm wrong. Come back with your own arguments. Come back with your own financials and tell me that I'm wrong. It's just been interesting. So it's all popped off. But yeah, guys, I am going to go. Amazing show. I'm not going to be back tonight. I have a birthday. It's not my birthday. It's my other half. So I'm going to take her out tonight. So, you know, I need to... there'll be no show tonight. But, you know, so yeah, guys, thank you. Amazing show. I hope that was helpful. Get in the comments. Let me know what you think. Yeah, guys. I'm gonna take it's a are you on YouTube? I am Kiwi. This is YouTube. Yes, mate. No, I am Kiwi. I tend to do it this way because this works better for the channel. But yeah, mate, I am. Wayne, I'm gonna take you to a fancy pub. So it's not just like a Witherspoons. It's like shit from your microwave. I love it. Yeah, I'm gonna take you to a fancy pub. That's not a spoon. It's not a Witherspoons, you know. So, but I don't mind the Witherspoons. I love a Witherspoons, cheap and cheerful. But no, she's a little bit more classy than me. So you know, I kind of need to spend more money. So you know, but guys, amazing. Thank you to Scott. Thank you to all the other mods in there. JB Gun and Nando's. A cheeky Nando's. I love a Nando's. I am a cheap date. Like, you could take me to a Witherspoons. Nando's, mate. Nando's these days is proper expensive for some chicken. Very last thing, make sure you vote Reform. Oh, come on, Samuel. Mate, come on, mate. Look, JB getting 3 legs from tonight. That's way cost. Look, mate, I'm not going to confirm anything, mate. I'm not denying anything. I'm not confirming anything, mate. You know, I'm just saying. You know, look, with the amount of look, I think there comes a point, right, whereby you know you sort of, you know, there's an amount of money and there's a level that you go to and you spend, and I'm not asking for anything, right? I'm not asking for much. It's just an insinuation, right? You know, so let's see, shall we? AKA the tripod. Again, I'm not going to say that it's not true. I'm not going to say that it is true. I'm just saying, you know, you guys believe there are some rumours in life that I will leave out there, because it makes me look better, so, oh, I love it. I love it. I love it, mate. If I was to leave after that, I think she would leave me. So guys, yeah, amazing. I will be back tomorrow. I will be back tomorrow night as per normal. I'll start doing the normal shows. I'll do an evening show again. Let's hope some stuff comes out, because it has been quite boring. Bag of chips, then you back on the show with black. Exactly, mate. Exactly. A bag of chips, and I'll be back on here with a smashed up face. So but guys, I'm gonna go back to work. Amazing stream, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you to the mods. Thank you for you guys. Amazing stuff. You guys make this channel. I love this show today. I think it's really interesting to talk about stuff. And again, feel free to get into the comments and refute what I'm saying. Tell me if I'm talking a load of bollocks. But yeah, guys, legend of the chat. So have a good rest of your afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you are in the world. I will see you tomorrow. Don't forget Samuel, thank you for adding stuff to the chat. Interesting. Everyone has their opinion. Lemonia's running things. Hey, you've done. If you've become a large content creator, I'll never come back. Last stream, remember, you're my goat. Thank you. The legend that is Samuel. We've got Lee on here now. We've got all sorts of legends on here, all for the wrong reasons, but that's cool. So guys, thank you very much. Have a good rest of your days. I'll be back tomorrow, unless anything breaks between now and tonight. Wink, wink. I will be back. Jamie, hi from Carol from England. Hello. Peace out, guys. See you tomorrow. If anything does break, I will be back before tonight. Wink, wink. See you guys later. Take care.